All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Introduction to Six Sigma. You guys have already heard a lot about Six Sigma, I presume. Heard a lot about it from the directors, the managers. We even had a group meeting about it as well. So this introductory session today is to kind of just bring everybody on the same page about what we really mean about Six Sigma, why we're doing it, what's the purpose of it, what's the basic background of it. Before I get started, any current master black belts, green belts, yellow belts in here for Six Sigma? Anybody who's been through a Six Sigma training before? No? All right, good. So this kind of gives me an idea of where to kind of get started with the denominators. So we'll walk through some of those things. The agenda for today is quite simple. We always book out more time, or at least 15 minutes towards the end, which is Q&A. So I'm hoping this training goes for no more than about 60 to 75 minutes. You won't have to run out of there. But we'll try to keep this as engaging and as interactive as possible. So today we're going to actually work through just three simple things. The vision and process of all these trainings. We'll walk through the Six Sigma overview. And then the fundamentals of Six Sigma, just to kind of get you started on your homework assignment, what's going to be going through today. If there's anything you'd like to add, anything you'd like to subtract, anything you already know, please let me know so we can kind of keep those in mind. So here's our first slide for vision and process, where we're going to be teaching via a andragogical method. Anybody heard of andragogy before, as opposed to pedagogy? We know what pedagogy is from a teaching standpoint. Pedagogy is basically teaching to kindergarten through 12th graders, sometimes even college students, if you will. But pedagogy says, I'm going to give you some work. You go do it. Don't ask me any questions. Get it done. Bring it back. Right? That doesn't work for adults. If somebody told us to do that, we'd say, well, it's not for me. Andragogy says, you are in charge. We have to make sure that if within this particular training, if you can't figure out how you can use Six Sigma for your projects, and whatever pain point you come back with, that you can apply that in your day-to-day lives or your day-to-day workloads, you're not going to do it. Or at least you're not going to do it well. Right? So we want to make sure that you actually take charge of this. The way we're going to kind of make sure that happens is that you'll be involved in trainings like this every other week. So I'm not going to see you every week like this, but every other week we're going to ask you to come to a training about Six Sigma and kind of advancing your knowledge level. My guarantee to you, and we're being recorded here so you can kind of hold me to that, is by the end of these 6 to 9 months, you will be eligible and have enough knowledge to pass a green belt certification exam. Right? We're trying to get those examination costs down so you can at least, we can afford it, and depending on who's paying for it or whatnot. But at the very least, my job is to make sure that you get enough knowledge that you can sit for a green belt exam and not have any qualms about it. Right? And the other week that you're not here, you'll be working on either a pain point, a homework assignment, some sort of a project charter, a process map, whatever that week's assignment is what you'll be working on. So I would set aside about an hour to 2 hours every week for this kind of thing. I know it's a lot of time commitment. Even an hour to 2 hours doesn't sound too much, but just the thought process and everything else you have going on, I understand it's tough. But the whole point is that by spending 2 hours a week for the next 9 months on this, you'll essentially save yourself tons of hours afterwards. And you can actually have a statistical analysis of how much time not only have you saved for yourself, but for your group, for the company, and for the college overall. Right? So that's the whole idea behind the training and mentoring process. The process improvement assignments, these are going to be the 1 to 2 hour things that you're going to actually take away and tasks to go, if you will. So today's task that I want you to keep in mind as we go through the training is that you have to come back in 2 weeks with a pain point identified, at least 1 to 3 pain points. What I mean by pain points are things that you would like to use Six Sigma to improve. Right? Things like one of your colleagues said they want to improve the fact that the systems need to be up and running 24/7. Right? There's absolutely zero downtime for the websites, Outlook, what have you. So whatever that system that they're going to look at, they're going to measure and make sure that what are the items that cause me not to have that system up and running. Right? So anything else that you can feel that is a pain point for you, anything you can improve, you want to make sure you bring that to the table. Right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later to give you more ideas. We can brainstorm on that as well. The third thing we're going to do is with these trainings is have opportunities for professional development. Kind of like the one that you have in front of you today. So I want to spend a little bit of time doing that right now so we get you guys engaged right away. Has anybody done a multiple intelligence indicator before? An MII? Or like a Myers-Briggs exam? Something like that? This is kind of a poor man's version of a Myers-Briggs, if you will. All right? It's not the fanciest one, but it'll kind of give you a little bit of data, a little bit of background about how you like to learn so you can use that as you are doing your projects, right? We're all adults by this time, so we have certain ways and certain habitual habits that we have that we like to do. Others are not our strong points. So let's make sure we know that at the very least. And then lastly, we're going to be highlighting some tools and show you what tools are available for you overall. So I'm going to go to this document cam here so you can see what I'm doing. And we'll work on this sheet together. Does everybody have the sheet in front of them? Is anybody missing a sheet? Good.
Can you zoom in a little bit? Maybe just do one section at a time.
Zoom in over here?
Yeah.
Sure. How do I zoom in on this thing? Is this just
with the dial.
the little dial thing?
There you go.
All right. Is that good? Yeah. All right. So we're going to do this one together. We'll do section A, and then you can do the rest of the sections by yourself. So section A, I enjoy reading. I'm going to put always. And question 2, I like to learn and use new words. And I'm going to say sometimes. And then I'm good at using words to describe things. Let's say I'm going to say never. Feel free to say whatever yours is. And I like to write. I'm going to choose always. All of these basically correspond to this legend up here. The always are worth 3 points. The sometimes are worth 2 points. The nevers are worth 1 point. So in my case, I've got 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 3, which equals to a 9. And that's my score. So if you pick all nevers, you're going to have a 4. If you pick all always, you'll have a 12, right? So your range should be between a 4 and a 12. Does that make sense? If you're getting less than a 4 or more than 12, we've got to enroll you in a different class. All right? So spend a few minutes going through A all the way through H. There is a back to the page as well, so make sure you fill both sides out. And when you're done, just look up so I know that you guys are ready to go. So while you do that, I'm actually going to put up the answer sheet up here. All right, so you should be finishing those up right now. If your answers are coming out to be all 8s and 9s and 7s and something like that, that means that you're just not being truthful to yourself. Be more honest about it. If you're more honest about it, you will end up with at least 1 or 2 that are in the 11s and 12s, higher sections, which is basically your preference overall. So if you're answering all sometimes, you're not doing justice to yourself. So make sure you're actually thinking about the answer and say, is this really sometimes? Or am I really always on some of these? All right? So let's go through these. We're all done for the most part. So your score should be anywhere between a 4 and a 12. So this is the way it works. Any item or any section that you have 10s, 11s, or 12s, that means those are your high performance indicators. Right? That's where you're actually good at. That's your sweet spot. That's your niche. 7s, 8, or 9s, you're indifferent. You're not good. You're not bad. There's no issues. You can work with either angle of those. 4, 5, or 6, those are not your strengths, right? Depending on the amount of time you have, you either want to work on those strengths or completely avoid them, right? However much time you have in your lives to do your own professional development overall. Our goal here is to make sure that as you're working on Six Sigma projects and you're collaborating with other people as well, you're understanding your own strengths and others' strengths as well, and perhaps the opposite of that, your limitations and others' limitations. So in this case, how many do we have that are 10, 11, or 12? And by show of hands, how many of you guys are 10, 11, or 12 on Section A? Any 12s? You got a 12 on this? 12? Any 12s? Any 11s? 11s? Both of you? So I'm going to pick on both of you if you don't mind. 11s are usually 12s, but 11s as well. Basically, A stands for verbal linguistic. You're actually very good at verbalizing your expressions. In fact, so much so that you learn better when you teach other people. So that's something that you want to keep in mind, is that, if I'm actually going to do a project, perhaps I want to have somebody I can bounce ideas off of, and actually if I have the responsibility of teaching other people, I'm going to do better myself. So that's something that you want to keep in mind for verbal linguistic individuals. How about B? Anybody 10, 11, or 12 on the B? Logistical, mathematical, logical, mathematical. Any 12s? Keep your hand up if you're a 12. Chad, you're a 12. Anybody else? All right, I'm going to pick on you, Chad, if you don't mind. All right. Do you find yourself making lists when you do things, or at least at the very least you're thinking in a mathematical, logical approach that says step 1, step 2, step 3. You may just make a list, even if you don't get anything done off that list, just by the fact that you made a list, you feel better. Yeah? So now, one of the good things about logical mathematical people is that they usually can get a lot done by just checking things off. However, one of the drawbacks of somebody being a 12 or an 11 or a 10 on some of these is that they always think in the way that there's a saying that goes, normal is what I am. Have you heard of that? Basically says, and you're thinking, well, if I'm thinking mathematically logically, why are you not thinking mathematically logically? What's wrong with you, right? Which, there's nothing wrong with anybody. It's just a matter of everyone is their own normal. So in this case, I didn't get your name back there. Rona? So Rona, what was your mathematical logical score? 11. So you're pretty high on that as well. Let's say if your mathematical logical score was like a 7, and your linguistic score was an 11, you'll be teaching Chad in a linguistic manner, not a mathematical logical manner. And you're not going to get anywhere with Chad because he's all thinking, why is she not explaining to me 1, 2, 3, 4? In your case, you're pretty high on both of them, so you can relate on that as well. So you want to make sure that you know what your strengths and how to kind of use those as well. What about C? Any 10, 11, or 12 on C? Holly, what do you have on there? 11. 12. 10. 11. Any other 12s? 12s? 11s? 11 to 12 is pretty good. So spatial overall means you're a visual learner, right? And if I can actually, and one of the things you have to do as you start moving in the Six Sigma direction is that you just start pegging people and figuring out if this person is a spatial learner, if they're a linguistic, linguistic learner, mathematical, logical learner. You'll start to do that by looking at them. The way that I can kind of guess that you two are spatial learners is because you spend more time looking at the screen, right? That doesn't mean that you're not listening to what I'm saying, but just to get the input that you need to actually see something and internalize it via visual methods, right? Which sometimes we think that, why is he not paying attention to me? He's not making eye contact. Well, he's actually paying more attention because he's looking at a visual stimulus that's giving him more information. So if you're presenting to someone who has a spatial learning capability, you want to make sure you have some visual aids to help you with that, right? How about D? And I'll tell you why this makes sense in a technical setting. Any 12s on D? Any 10, 11, 12s? 10 over there. 10, 11, 10? What do you got? 10? Richard? 12. Well. So Richard, you play instrument? Well, from yesterday, I remember instrument, right? So usually if you have a 10, 11, or 12, you have some sort of a musical inclination where you're either playing an instrument or you sing or something musical. The reason this is important, I'll give you an example. We did a little project for Microsoft at one point. I worked for a division called Avanade in Chicago. And we had a new CIO come in for our division. But he came in from a marketing department. When he came in from the marketing department, he wanted to bring in all the clients and walk them through our development room and say, you know what? Hey, here's our fancy developers that you can talk to and, pick their brains. And what's the last thing developers want to do? Talk to customers, right? So we all just put on our headphones and ignored everything going on and just went. So we got used to that kind of stimulus, and we got focused into our work. So about a month later, the CIO just got upset and he sent out a memo and says, no headphones on the development floor. So in about 1 month, we lost 20% of our development force. 60% of our DBAs just went out the door. They just say, you know what, we're not going to put up with this. We don't need to do it, right? So you have to be careful about some people's inclination and how you kind of make decisions, sometimes overwhelming decisions on some of those things. How about E, 10, 11, or 12? 10, 11, or 12. What do you got there? 11. Chad? 10. 10. 11. 10. 10. So no 12s on this overall? So 11s is the highest one we're going to pick on. Who is the 11 in here? 11? Sorry, what was your name? Gary. I promise I'll learn everybody's name by the end of the training. So Gary, do you find yourself that when you actually do something, you'll learn it better? You're more of a kinesthetic person that says, no matter how much you explain it to me, I'm not going to get it until I actually do it myself. Hands-on. Hands-on, exactly. Not only hands-on, but from a communication standpoint, do you find yourself talking with your hands a lot, or at least make some gestures to make sure that you have a visual communications? What was your spatial score in C? 9. So that's not too high overall. But your bodily kinesthetic says you have to be hands-on to be able to learn something. So if I just basically told you what these meant, they wouldn't mean anything to you unless you actually do an exercise that does something with it. Somebody explains to you how to use a computer, unless you do it yourself, you're not going to understand it, right? So that's something you have to keep in mind as you teach these individuals. Next one I kind of want to do together. It's not too many of us. So I'd like to actually switch over here to this camera and do the next one together. So Ramesh, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask from you if you can give me your F score and your G score simultaneously. So what's your F and what's your G? 11 and 8. So I'm going to circle that because anything more than a 2 says you have a preference, right? All right, you see that? Great. Well, hold on one second. F and G score, yeah. 9 and 10, so no preference there. 9 and 10? Double 8s, no issue there. 9 and 6, so you have a little bit of a preference. Gary? 10 and 8, I'll leave you alone, we won't pick on you. 8 and 10, we'll leave you alone as well. Mark? 9 and 6, look at you. So you and Chad get along really well. 8 and 12, all right, so we have a definite preference here. Largest difference of a 4 so far. 9 and 7, all right, so a little bit of a difference, but we'll leave you alone on a 2. Rory? 9 and 10, all right, we can leave you alone as well. Holly? 10 and 9. You get to be left alone. Andrew? 8, 10, a little bit of a difference. 10 and 8, all right. You guys just making it up so I don't pick on you? So just keep keeping it close? Like, you know what, I'm really a 10 and 6, but he's going to pick on me if I say something. All right, so I'm going to pick on this one here, 8 and 12. What was your name? Pat? Pat. So hopefully you don't mind, Pat. Pat, but you definitely have a inclination towards one rather than the other. So your F score is 8 and your G is a 12, which basically means it doesn't mean that you're not an interpersonal person. This just basically means what you like to think about and how you like to think about it. So in this case, your F score being 8 and your G score being 12, G means intrapersonal. So in a brainstorming way, let's say if I were to give you an idea to brainstorm, you would be actually better at brainstorming by yourself first and then coming to a group and presenting your ideas, as opposed to someone who's higher. Who's the first one here? Ramesh, were you 11 and 8? So in your case, you're better at brainstorming in an open setting. If you can speak your thoughts out to somebody and say, you know what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Just by talking it out loud, you'll actually get better ideas coming out about you, right? As opposed to Pat, she's opposite. If you give her an idea, she wants to think about it, internalize it, or verbalize it, and then bring it to the group. You're just ready to shout the ideas out and start to think about it, right? So you want to make sure that when you're working in collaborative settings, these are things that you're considering as well. Does that make sense? Yeah? The last one I want to walk through is the naturalistic. I'll tell you why this is important. Any 12s on naturalistic? Oh, wow. 1, 2, 3, 4. You guys are all 12s on this? My goodness. All right, so do me a favor. 12, there's actually a scientific fact that 12s shut down after 4 hours of being indoors. Like your brain's literally shut down after 12 hours of being inside if you're a naturalistic person and 12 on that. Only because you need that outside stimulus. You need that vitamin D. You need fresh air. You need something. So if somebody were to trap you in a room for 8 hours, you're going to want to shoot yourself at the end of the day. Do you guys find yourself going out for lunch quite a bit, or at least moving away from your desk, trying to find a window somewhere just to get fresh air and some light? Walks when it's warmer out. Yeah, absolutely. So that's something that you want to keep in mind, because if you're in a collaborative setting and you have a lot of naturalistic people, you want to make sure that you keep the indoor conversation to a minimum. Let them walk around. Let them go outside. Let them at least peek out the window at the very least. Right? Cool. So does this make sense? Yeah? So this is a poor man's version of the multiple intelligence indicator, but this at least gives you a slight idea. So every other week, I do want to do an activity of this type to kind of build your professional development around leadership, around collaboration, around things of that sort. Since we've got you in a room, that's going to actually help your Six Sigma abilities as well. Any questions? Good? All right, so let's get started on the curriculum for today, which is topic 1 on Six Sigma overview. Any statisticians in here? Anybody who's done stats recently, after college? Or just college was the last time we all took a stats class and forgot about stats after that, right? Stats is actually useful, especially in Six Sigma. So this sigma symbol that we see here, that sigma symbol refers to a standard deviation, right? Standard deviation is essentially a measure of variation. We're going to soon find out that variation is our enemy. Anything different gets produced is bad. So if we're going to ghost these two machines, we want to make sure that they get ghosted exactly the same, or they have the exact same image. Because when I troubleshoot them, it would be prudent to be able to troubleshoot the same baseline, right? That's what we're talking about when we talk about these Six Sigma being the exact same with no variation. Six Sigma is actually an aspiration or a goal or a performance to get to a level of 3.4 defects per million opportunities, which essentially means 99.9997% defect free. Right? Anybody take Tylenol, Advil on a daily basis or once in a while? How many come in a Tylenol box? I think Richard told me 80 yesterday about. Yeah? How many of those 80 Tylenol are you okay with being bad Tylenols or defect Tylenol? Not defective. They just don't work. You know, they might not kill you. They may kill you, but they just don't work. How many are you okay with being bad in a batch of 80? 0. How about in a batch of 800? 0. Batch of 800,000. Still 0, right? You're not okay with any defect whatsoever. So you want to make sure that we have a 99.9997% defect-free opportunity. Now, why Six Sigma? Why not 7 Sigma? Why not 8 Sigma? We've all seen the 6-minute abs, right? The next guy comes out with the 5-minute abs and the 4-minute abs and the 3-minute abs. So is somebody ever going to come out with 7 Sigma? Well, if they have a time machine, yeah, maybe. Because the lowest you can go from a 6 standard deviation rate, which is capturing everything 6 standard deviations away from the mean, will be 3.4 defects out of a million opportunities. Because if you need to go to 7 Sigma, you literally will go negative numbers. That means you have to go back in time and fix stuff that you've already messed up, which, you know, unless we have a Marty McFly DeLorean, not going to happen, right? So when you see that curve over there, that essentially tells you what amount of data is being checked as being checked for defects. So let's say we're talking about this Tylenol example again. If we're okay with 68.26% of Tylenols being okay, we're at a 1 Sigma level, which will cover anything within 1 standard deviation. If you're okay with 95% of your Tylenols being okay, you can operate at a 2 Sigma level. If you're okay with 99.7% of your Tylenols being okay, you can operate at a 3 Sigma level. And if you really want to be 99.9997% defect free, you must operate at a 6 Sigma level. 3 Sigma to a certain point was an acceptable baseline, primarily in the industrial age. But since we moved into the technological age, 6 Sigma became our baseline, right? And I'll tell you more examples about that overall. But do you remember getting graded on a curve back in college? Did anybody know what that meant? Did everybody know what that meant except me? I didn't figure that out until I was literally like 25, 26 years old. I'm thinking, wow, I had no idea what this meant. Because everybody said you were messing up the curve. I'm like, I don't know what that means, right? That basically meant that most 68% of the data fell within the 1 standard deviation. But then if you have more than that, if you're actually having a different result, you're actually moving away the curve, and you're moving the entire baseline away from them, right? So you want to make sure that you're keeping within your 6 Sigma standard deviations. Now, why is the level so important? Let's say if you're operating at a 3 Sigma level back in the industrial age, if we're operating at a 7% defect rate, would that be acceptable today? 7% basically means no modern computer would function. Do you know how many processors run on the back of our computers? It would be impossible for us to have a modern functioning computer. About 11 million healthcare forms would be mishandled. 19,000 U.S. savings bonds would be lost every month. 54,000 checks would be lost each night. 4,000 invoices would be sent out incorrectly each month, which I think still happens. 500 million erroneous call transactions would be recorded each day, and 270 million erroneous credit card transactions would be recorded each year in the United States. That's just at a 7% defect. That's still at a 3%, Sigma 3, 7% defect rate, right? There's places in the world that still operate at a 3 Sigma level. I did a quick project for AKDN for about 3 months in Tajikistan, which is about in Central Asia, and was working in kind of a room this size. We're all working together, and the lights go out. And I'm the only guy who panics in the room. Everyone else just kept working. And I got up, I'm like, what's going on? They're like, what's your problem? Just shut up and keep working. I said, well, the electricity goes out for about 7 hours a month. It's just, everybody knows. And it goes out, there's power issues, it's going to happen. So you just kind of live with it and work on with it. That's not something that within the Western world, within what we do, is acceptable. Everybody okay on Six Sigma and the levels? Yeah? No questions? Cool. So where did Six Sigma come from? Why are we all sitting here today? Who invented this stuff, right? A gentleman named Bill Smith. Bill Smith invented this, DMAIC philosophy, but also the statistical analysis of doing a project, making sure that you have actually some statistical background, evidentiary data to prove your results overall. So Bill Smith's the name you want to remember, but not only Bill Smith, when he created it, if he creates something, it doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere unless you have some champions that help you out. And in this case, Bob Gelvin at Motorola and Jack Welch at GE, so two big names within the business community, they actually were the champions and actually said, and Jack Welch said, you know what, I'm going to assign Six Sigma metrics to executive bonuses. So if your process is operating at a 3 Sigma, you're only going to get X amount of bonus. If you're operating at a 4 Sigma, you're going to get Y bonus. If you're operating at a 5 Sigma, so on and so forth. If you're operating at a 6 Sigma, you're going to get this enormous bonus that's going to just, floor you, right? And that's where you kind of got the bonus incentives assigned to him, and by doing that, it just went through the roof. In the Phoenix branch of GE, and I know I can only speak for the Phoenix branch because that's where I trained at one point, even the custodial staff needs to be Greenbelt certified. So in order to get a janitorial job at GE Phoenix, you have to actually get a Greenbelt certification, right? Just to make sure you don't do things twice, you're not redundant, there's no waste, there's lean processes within your process, within your systems. What companies use it? Nokia, Sony, Crane, Polaroid when it existed, Amex, DuPont, Ford, Lockheed Martin. There's tons and tons of companies that are actually doing Six Sigma approaches to make sure that they're not underutilizing their resources or doing redundant items overall. But fundamentally, Six Sigma will be a set of techniques and tools for process improvement. Six Sigma will improve the quality of processes. It's a customer-driven perspective, and Six Sigma incorporates measurements and stats as a way to identify and work on improvement efforts. So remember, going back to your pain point that we're going to come back with in 2 weeks, these are the things you want to look for. Are there any process improvements in your department, within the college, within the technology services group you'd like to work on? What is it that you're seeking to improve? What's your main objective? Is it measurable? And what are the voices of the customers that are talking to you? And we'll talk about the VOCs in a little bit because we have to kind of give in to our schizophrenic approaches within Six Sigma. All right, let's talk about the Y equals F of X approach, and I'll do this by way of example. Anybody deliver pizzas? Was I the only guy who delivered pizzas? You deliver pizzas? Who'd you deliver for?
A little place called Skis.
Skis. Anybody else do any pizza deliveries? Holly and I are the only hard workers in here. You made pizzas? I don't think Little Caesars delivers though, right? Yeah. At least they didn't back then. I don't know if they still do. All right, so I delivered for Domino's back in the day. Do you remember the Domino's commercial, 30 minutes or less, and it's free, right? If it didn't, how many of you guys cheated on that and held the door closed until it was 31 minutes? But guess whose paycheck that came out of? If the pizza wasn't there in 30 minutes, did Domino's pay for it? No, it was me. The driver paid for it. And if I knew half as much about Six Sigma as I did back then, I'd make sure that I went back to my boss and say, hey, you owe me money. Because I don't want to pay to work, which actually for the first month and a half, I actually had to pay to work there. Right? I had to give him a part of my tips because I was late in some of these cases. But was that in my control? My Y, or my primary metric, was getting pizzas there in time, correct? What are my F of X's? What are the factors that make me late, or what are the factors that impact my timely delivery? What do you think would impact that? Weather, which is not in my control. Distance, not in my control. Somebody makes a mistake in the kitchen, we have to redo the pizza, not in my control. Traffic, not in my control. Other orders, not in my control. Right? All these F of X's, I can't do anything about. Yet, I'm responsible for the Y. Does that happen to you here anytime? Right? You're responsible for the end result, but you have no control about what's going to be your inputs. Right? That's where Six Sigma really becomes compliant, where you can actually say, what can I do about these F of X's? Where can I get these F of X's, and what can I do about them to control my outside factors so that my end result is taken into account? So one of the things I figured out after a month and a half, and I said, no matter how bad the F of X's are, how bad the traffic is, how long the distance is, because we had a perimeter around there, how bad the weather is, I know that I can only deliver 3 pizzas. That's it, in 30 minutes. So every time I got 3 pizzas, I just booked. And and I took off, right? So I got 3 pizzas, I'm going to deliver them, I come back, and the next guy is doing his deliveries and all that other stuff. So I was able to control some of those f of x's, or at least eliminate them out of the equation, right? So how can we actually do that with our f of x? It might not be that easy here, but those are just some ideas that we could come up with just by knowing our f of x model. Does that make sense? So your f of x are your function of x's that produce your y, which is your main primary indicator, all right? Now, we use the f of x model, we use y equals f of x model within the DMAIC philosophy. So if you don't take anything away from this training, at least take this away, which is the DMAIC model. If you want to tattoo this on your forehead, you know, put a little barbed wire tattoo called DMAIC, whatever you need to do. Define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Those are the main things you want to do. So when you define, exactly, define is defining and quantifying your problem. So when you actually come back with your pain points, right, make sure you have some sort of a definition to that that says, this is my issue. Is it measurable? What's the baseline right now? Is it really bad, or do I think it's bad because it's an assumption? What's the data that sets your baselines? What are some of the f of x's? How, when you analyze this, what are some of the factors within your pain point? So have those in mind in the back of your head. Develop solutions. So if we develop and hypothesize on some solutions and then put it out there. So, for example, I took 3 pizzas, right, and I made sure that that was a delivery model that worked for me. Then I told the other drivers about it. I said, hey, why don't we all of us take 3 pizzas at a time, and we'll all be on time. Instead of me taking 10 and you taking 1, every time 3 comes, I'll go. 3 comes, you go. By the time I'll be back, I'll have the next 3. And we made a nice little cycle process out of it, right? Because before I did that, we actually moved it out, right? Another solution on this DMAIC philosophy, just to kind of give you an example, and I don't mean to be tangential, but just because I remembered it, a training like this was done at FedEx as well. Anybody ever seen a FedEx truck operate? Anybody drive for FedEx? Even better? No? So if you see, watch a FedEx truck next time. And I hope they still do this because I know they implemented it in the early 90s. FedEx trucks don't make left turns. Why? What happens at left turns? You wait at left turns. What else happens? You're exposed in the middle of the intersection, right? So instead of waiting at a left turn, why not just make all right turns and keep delivering and delivering and delivering and delivering, thereby also decreasing the amount of time you're waiting at a left turn, exposed, getting hit by a car somewhere. Just by doing this, so just at a training like this, they did this training for the drivers, one of the drivers came up with this idea. And essentially, they increased their productivity of package delivery by 22%. Just by making right turns. That's it, right? Now, the gas was kind of a washout because they were driving more, but they were not waiting as much. But also, as a secondary metric, their safety rates went up. They were having less accidents because they were waiting less in the middle of an intersection, right? So it's a win-win in both cases. So they were able to develop a solution and then implement it and sustain it in the controlling process that says, you know what, not only will I make right turns, everyone will make right turns, and we'll make sure that there's a scheduling department or a route department that manages that. They're only allowed to make left turns in 2 cases, if it's a one-way going left, and going back into the garage to pick up more packages. Those are the only 2 times the FedEx trucks are allowed to make left. I think UPS and USPS have picked up on that since then, but essentially when they did that, for every 5 packages they delivered, for every 5 packages USPS and UPS delivered, FedEx was able to deliver 6 without adding any costs, without adding any trucks, without adding any drivers overall. So as we move forward, these are the tools we're going to work with. Within the define, measure, analyze, improve, and control phase, we're going to be working with the project charter, stakeholder assessments, Pareto charts, process maps, voice of the customers, which we'll learn a little bit more about today in the fundamentals, cause and effect diagrams, SIPOCs, FMEA, XY matrix. You don't have to know any of these right now, which I'm sure you don't, but by the end of this training, you will be an expert in every one of these. All right? Each one of these tools you'll be able to use. So next time you have a problem, you can say, you know what? This would be a great exercise to put in an XY diagram. This would be a great exercise to do an FMEA analysis with, right? And when you do that, that's when you start going up these food chains. The curse of Six Sigma is that once you become really good at this, you see process improvement everywhere, right? It's like you see dead people everywhere. You see process improvements everywhere, right? So as you start to move up this chain of yellow belt, green belt, master black belt, you're gonna start to inherently work with this stuff. I'll give you the way that this kind of scale works. So I'll give it to you by way of example as well. Is that if you have a yellow belt, you're kind of equivalent to having a cocktail party level discussion of Six Sigma. So you can go to a cocktail party and speak about it intelligently. Nobody's going to laugh at you. But if you put a yellow belt on your resume, people are going to laugh at you, right? There's no reason to put a yellow belt on your resume. The lowest one that actually makes a difference in the process is a green belt, which is why we're training you guys for a green belt, right? Which is making sure that you can actually do something with the processes that you learn. A black belt can do things on their own, but also mentor a green belt as well. And a master black belt can teach the class, has mentored at least 100 green belts, and has worked on at least one $100 million project or multiple $10 million projects, counting up to $100 million overall. There's only about 150,000 or so master black belts in the world, including myself. So if that's something you want to look at, it's about a 7-year process that can get you there. And it's definitely well worth it. Oh, sorry. Some of the other ones that you're going to use are champions, sponsors, stakeholders, and subject matter experts. But we already work with these today, right? This is something that we already have. We're just going to work with them as complementary roles to what you will do as Six Sigma green belts or hopefully black belts and master black belts. So the expectations from you by the end of the training are to make sure that you develop your skills, gain insight into tools and techniques, develop a problem-solving toolbox, develop process and customer-centric approaches, and work more collaboratively, right? So essentially, everything that we did today, right, we're going to try and apply over the next 6 to 9 months. I promised you that the next 6 to 9 months will be a lot more interactive, where you're going to be actually working on your computers, doing your own projects. So this will be project time as opposed to lecture time. But for the first course, I just needed to give you and disseminate all the information overall. You'll be taking a survey at the end of the course as well to kind of tell us what you're interested in, if you'd like to make any changes, make any adjustments to the training, because I'd rather make them now than do them 3 months from now, right? So it behooves me to make sure that I apply Six Sigma methodology to my own training if I'm going to teach it, right? So we want to make sure we do that as well. Any questions so far on the basics of Six Sigma? Going once, going twice? Gone. All right. So let's talk about the fundamentals of Six Sigma and how we're going to use it. Now, we all do this already, right? You all are very familiar with process maps. I've seen them all over the walls here, right? But do we really know the symbols that go behind these process maps? Do we really know what different levels they are, right? You can have a high level, a detailed level, and a functional map or a swim lane map, which kind of you see on the wall there as well. But let's talk about a high level map, right? Even these boxes speak to you. Why is this in a Terminator oval symbol as opposed to being in a rectangle or a square symbol going forward, right? What do they mean? So I want you to be aware of this as you move forward. So as you do your process maps, try to use some of these basic symbols. The Terminator symbol, which is the oval, the process symbol for the rectangle, the rhombus is the decision making, and then you've got your arrow that combines everything. Now if you want to be fancy-dancy and impress some people, feel free to use some of these alternative symbols, which is alternative process, predefined, which is the double box, the trapezoid being the manual operation, the preparation step, and then if there's a lag or a delay. Any PMPs in here? Anybody done a PMP certification or PMI? You've done a PMP before? So you're familiar with the lag time and delay time as well, right? So that would be your delay time tactic that we use. The reason those become important is because the process can speak to you. I'll give you an example. I did a telecommunication project for someone, and I interviewed them on their process, saying, what do you do for a day-to-day living? What do you do as your job role? And he said, well, I do load testing. Does anybody know what load testing is? They actually test the servers to see how many people can hit at the same time, right? And that's not done manually. It's done via a script. You write a script, you play the script, you process the exceptions, and then you move on, right? So I asked the guy, well, what do you do? Well, on Monday, I run the script. He said, during the early week, I run the script, and then later in the week, I come back and fix the exceptions. I'm like, walk me through it. So Monday morning, you start the script. Like, yep. What do you do then? When do the exceptions come back? Well, they'll come back to Thursday. It takes 3 days to run. Like, all right, so what do you do for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday? Like, what do you mean? I'm running the script. Like, no, you're not running the script. The script is running, but what are you doing? Like, what do you mean? I'm running the script. You're not running the script. You're just hitting the play button and walking away for 3 days, right? That's 60% of your work week that's not being used productively, right? So kind of those kinds of things. But why is that a problem? Because somebody, when they wrote the process map, they just said, run script, right? When they should have said, hit play on script, lag time for 3 days, which is not going to be productive time. They can use them for something else. And then process exceptions, right? Just by somebody making that one indicator, this guy had a cushy job for like 2.5 years till I showed up. So he didn't really like me overall, but but that was one of the Six Sigma initiatives that we did over there. Because those particular process maps will speak to you, right? They'll actually say something to you. So speaking of the voices of the customers that we have to listen to, within Six Sigma, we kind of have to give in to our schizophrenic nature. which basically means we have to listen to a lot of different voices, right? Some of the voices we listen to are the voices of the customer, voices of the business, voices of the associate, and voice of the process as well. The process one I've actually added myself. Officially within Six Sigma, there's these three. But overall, just kind of like the example I gave you, the process speaks to you, right? Another example we'll do is, if you go back to this, I'm not sure if you can see that back there, but this says preheat oven, prepare meat, cook meat. If the meat's done, you keep moving. If it's not done, you come back around, right? Now, if every single time I'm cooking my meat, and every single time I get a no answer when I go to that decision-making point, what is the process telling me? The oven's not hot enough. It's not working, right? There's something I got to change. But the voice of the customer is never going to tell me that, because by the time the customer gets the meat, it's good. They don't know the difference. The business is never going to tell me that, because they don't see an issue because the customer is not complaining, right? The associate's not going to tell me that because they don't have to actually do anything. They just, it's additional work for them, but they're not going to complain about it because it's so fast, right? So the process speaks to you. That's why that VOP is really important as well. So you want to make sure that you're listening to, when your pain point comes back, those 1 to 3 pain points that you bring back, is it a customer speaking to you? Is it the business speaking to you, the associate, or the process? And you can gather these things via direct or indirect method. Anybody from help desk here? Help desk? Help desk. Great. So when you, how many calls do you get a day? You particularly, as opposed to the help desk? I don't know, average about 40 some calls, okay. So out of those 40 calls, if 30 of them were about password reset, let's say, that says something to you, right? Indirectly, the voice of the customer is telling you, hey, I need a way to reset my password, right? Where in fact, today you're going to take a little survey at the end. That's more of a direct method of feedback. You can directly answer some questions that I want asked. But indirectly, the process, the people, the customers still tell you something. So when you come back with your voice of the customers for your pain points, you've got to tell me, is it a direct, indirect, how did you gather this information overall, right? Because these voices of the customers are then going to equate to critical to quality measures. Now, let's do this by way of example as well, but I know nobody's here late to work ever, but if you were to be late to work, what would be some of the reasons that you're late to work? Bad weather, school delays, traffic, car problems, things of that sort, right? So you can put all these things out, traffic accident, couldn't find a parking place. That's my excuse, by the way. I couldn't find a parking space. Slept late, long lines at Starbucks, things of that sort, right? So should I be attacking long lines at Starbucks here? So I can go down to the guy at Starbucks and say, you know what, you're making my employees late, go hire somebody else, right? Hire an extra person between 8 and 9 so my guys aren't late, right? That would solve this issue if that guy wouldn't laugh at me. It would solve this issue. But would I be better served by making these into an affinity diagram and calling them delays in the building, and then delays at home, delays on the commute, kid and pet-related delays? If I put them into categories and now attack the category as opposed to the individual symptom, I can say, well, how can I eliminate delays in the building overall, right, as opposed to talking about just the Starbucks issue, right? How can I eliminate delays at home? Do I put a work-from-home day, right? If I let my employees work from home 1 day a week, will all my delays go away, right? Because they can have all their doctor's appointments and pet-related issues and all the other things that are scheduled on that 1 day as opposed to spread out during the week, right? These are just some thoughts and ideas we want to consider as we move from your VOCs to CTQs, which are critical to quality measures, right? That's it. That's all the information I'm going to give you today. Information overload? Enough information? Too much information? Decent? All right, cool. So this is the amount of information you're going to get on a bi-weekly basis, and then we're going to put it to work, right? So let's just quickly review the Six Sigma history and Six Sigma. What is Six Sigma? So within Six Sigma, we talked about that normal curve, right? We have within Six Sigma, so how defect-free are we? 99.9997% defect-free. Oh, by the way, I forgot one thing within defects is I want to make sure you know the difference between defect and defective. I'm sure everybody does, but just to make sure we all do. Everybody know the difference between defect and defective? The defective item is something you can't use. It's unusable. A defect may have a workaround or something of that, right? I'll give you an example here. Let's say if I have this cup. It's a sturdy cup. If I have a little defect here in the cup, I've got a little lip that's cut off. That's a defect, right? Does that make the cup unusable? Oh, I can kind of go like this and drink this way if I wanted to. What if that same defect was down here? Now it's defective, right? So that same defect, depending on the positioning, could make it defective as well. So make sure you realize that is it really a defect issue or is it a defective issue, right? Because that's going to make a difference on your voice to the customer and how urgent the issue may be. Six Sigma history, who invented it? Bill Smith, right? Y equals f of x. We talked about our pizza delivery solution. Y is our primary metric. F of x is our functions of x's that fit into that. DMAIC, what does DMAIC stand for? We had it tattooed on our foreheads, right? Find, measure, analyze, improve, control. Topic, and then after that we talked about some of the roles and responsibilities, yellow belt, green belt, black belt, master black belt. We have the champions, sponsors, subject matter experts, and stakeholders as well. And then we talked about defining the process, high level, functional, swim lane, and then VOCs and CTQs. How many different voices were there? Voice of the customer, business, process, associate. Don't forget the associate, because if you can't get support within your group to work on it, not going to go anywhere, right? Not going to be able to do it, champion it by yourself, right? Even Bill Smith wasn't able to do it by himself, okay? Cool. So your task to go is to identify 1 to 3 pain points. By the way, everybody gets a slide presentation. I emailed it to you before you came to class, so you should have this with you as well. The reason I did that is because I learned from the first couple of trainings where they say, you know what, can we get the slide deck before the class? And I said, sure, that's not a hard thing to do. So we kind of had to make that adjustment right away, right? Listen and document the VOC relevant to the pain point. What is the pain point that you're identifying, and what are the voices that you're listening to that are making sure that that comes in? And then before you leave today, if you can either log in or if you want to do it from your desk, if it's easier, just go ahead and fill out the survey, surveymonkey.com. That kind of tells us about this class. Did anybody have a problem scheduling with the Doodle scheduler? Was that okay? So one of the things we're trying to figure out as we move forward to this class is if you would prefer to schedule open, as in 1 out of 5 sessions, or would you prefer to have a set time that says every Wednesday I'm going to come to class 9 to 11, right, or 9 to 10:30? Or would you like to have more of a fluid, flexible schedule saying anytime during the week I can pick a session and come to that session? So I'm trying to get survey data on that so I can make a statistical decision as opposed to a, just an assumption decision. Since we have a little bit of time, we've got about 5 minutes left before, I've actually got 35 minutes. I'm going to give you the gift of time back at the end of the day. But for the next 5 minutes, I just want to work on a quick bonus slide, which is the Kano model, if you don't mind. Anybody bought a new car lately or a new purchase? When was the last time you bought a car? You just bought a car? Cool. What'd you buy? Mini Cooper. Nice. So why did you buy that Mini Cooper as opposed to, what else were you considering besides the Mini Cooper? I don't know what a complement, Fiat would be complementary to that? I don't know. A Mustang. All right. So why did you buy the Mini Cooper versus the Mustang? Mileage. What would you absolutely not buy the Mini Cooper without? Like if Mini Cooper did not have this, I'm not buying it. A convertible. All right. Fair enough. So if it was a convertible but it didn't have tires, would you still buy it? No, right? So those are your must-haves. Sometimes we take those as granted items, right? If it didn't have tires, if it didn't have brakes, if it didn't have a windshield, if it didn't have wipers, if it didn't have a steering wheel, you're not going to buy it. Those are considered your must-haves or dissatisfiers there that completely are deal breakers, right? But then there's performance indicators, like you said, that gas mileage, maybe safety, service, whatever else you have, service from the dealer, those become performance indicators. Is there something that just completely delights you about your Mini Cooper, just like a wow factor? It's just fun to drive overall, right? Like Bluetooth, I'm sure it has Bluetooth in there as well. So I'm looking at buying an A7, and the car is a hotspot. Like the car is a hotspot. I can go around being the world's internet if I wanted to. I can just go around and people can connect to me as an internet connection if they wanted to, right? So that's an incredible wow feature in the delighters, right? So the point we have to note is when we come back with our pain points, are our pain points actually delighters, performance indicators, or must-haves? Why is that going to make a difference? Because that's where your budgeting sometimes comes from, right? So is my problem bad enough that if you don't have it, you can't work? Is it a must-have? Is it a performance indicator? Or is it a delighter overall? So make sure you keep that in mind once you're thinking about some of these stuff. Anybody work on an HTML project when they did in high school? They took a programming class, HTML class. What's the first project we all work on for HTML? I think they still do it to this day. Remember the Hello World project, right? The Hello World project, we worked on that. Do you remember what you got on that project? On the Hello World? Oh, the new one.
Just know that the first thing in
That's the first one I put in what you work on. Do you remember what you got on that class? A or B probably. I mean, nobody gets less than a B, right? Unless you've got real challenges, you're not going to get less than a B, right? I've got 2 masters, working on my PhD, but I got a C- in that class. All right? Here's why. Because the instructor asked us, hey, when you make this HTML page, make sure you have 3 panes on the page. Make sure you say hello world on it, and make sure you use 4 different colors, right? So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to impress the heck out of this guy. So back then, Flash was new. I know it's not new now, but back then, Flash was new. And I went and I developed this Flash Media HTML page completely that had Flash incorporated. And I gave it to him. The guy next to me came in, and he didn't even do the homework. And he did it right in front of me, and he got an A, right? And I went back to the professor. I'm like, dude, why did I get a C-? He's like, look, I asked you for 3 panes. You gave me 1 big pane with the flash screen on it. I told you to write hello world. You wrote hello universe. I told you to write have 4 different colors. You got 19 colors. I told you to have 2 links. You have 14 links on it, right? Which don't even work, right? I asked you to have these 2 links to the DePaul page and another link to another page that he wanted, which I can't remember. But I didn't have any of those links. So I didn't give him any of the must-haves. I gave him all these fancy delighters, which I was happy about, but I didn't give him any of the must-haves. So I'm never going to forget the Kano model because I got a C- in that one particular assignment that, you know, I don't want to learn that the hard way ever again. So make sure that anything we do, we're not learning the hard way. It is as close to a must-have as possible. But if you've got all your must-haves in order, great, move on up, right? Audi would not be working on a hotspot car if they didn't have their 4-wheel drive suspension in order, right? So that's why I'm going to buy that car because I love the 4-wheel drive, but that delighter just kind of seals the deal for me, right? Those are some of the things that you want to make sure you consider. Does that make sense? Any questions? Are we okay on the pain points in your assignment for the next couple of weeks? Yeah? So if you don't mind, if you want to spend some time finishing this survey here, or if you want to take it back and do it at your desk, you can do that as well. Make sure you sign in before you leave. And I'm giving you back a half an hour of your day. How many people give you the gift of time? Thank you very much. Thanks, Richard.